Good morning. This is a full review hearing of Jeet Food and Wine, and welcome to today's hearing. My name is Councillor Kelly. I will be chairing today's hearing. My colleagues are Councillor Cordier and Councillor Sumner, and we comprise today's subcommittee for this review hearing. Alison Luff is the legal advisor to the subcommittee, and also present is Katie Sullivan, who is clerk to the subcommittee and will be minuting the meeting. In accordance with procedure, I shall invite the police to present the application for a review hearing and call any witnesses in respect of whom permission to appear has been given and answer any questions put to them. Then I'll invite the premises to make their representations and answer any questions. Then I shall invite the parties to sum up their respective cases. At the end of the subcommittee, accompanied by the legal advisor and the committee clerk, we will retire to consider the decision. The decision will be given at the end of the meeting and confirmed in writing within 5 working days. Now, just for the benefit of the room, if I could just go to the premises team, if you could all just introduce yourself, please.
Chair, my name is Tom Griffiths. I'm barrister for Mr. Talwar.
Chairman is Mr. Panchal here, and Mr. Jeet Talwar is here with me. He's just moved to the toilet, but he's sitting here with me.
Thank you.
With his wife, who was also here with us.
Okay. Premises? Sorry, police.
Good morning. My name's Heather Oliver. I'm counsel instructed by the Metropolitan Police Service. I'm assisted today by Police Constable Vicky Hewison, and also in attendance is PC Kerry Smart. And from the Licensing Authority?
Thank you, Chair. Bob Deere. I'm a Licensing Compliance and Enforcement Officer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deere. Miss Oliver, would you like to go ahead, please?
Thank you, sir. Well, this process started when on the 3rd of May of this year, police were called to Osterley Park Road at around 6:15 in the evening. I'll go on, of course, to give full details of what transpired, but in essence, it was alleged that Mr. Harjeet Singh Talwar, who is the designated premises supervisor and premises licence holder of Jeet Food and Wine, had, with a friend or associate, violently assaulted another male, and that assault included stamping on this man's head. The alleged victim is a disabled male. He was born without his right arm, and he was observed at the scene with cuts to his head. For the avoidance of doubt, there were 3 other main parties in relation to this incident. There was a female informant, there was her husband, and then there was an independent third-party witness. I'm obviously not going to use their names, but I will refer to them, I hope, consistently in those terms for the purposes of this hearing. Mr. Talwar was arrested, interviewed, and remains under investigation. This is a continuing live investigation, and there has not been a charging decision yet. Clearly, that incident involving Mr. Talwar gave rise to very serious concerns about the licence that was held by this premises in his name. The summary review process was triggered. A superintendent signed the requisite certificate confirming that in his view, these premises are associated with serious crime. At a hearing on the 7th of May, the licensing subcommittee decided to exercise their powers under the interim steps and suspended the license pending this full review. So we now come to today and a full review under section 53C of the Licensing Act. You, of course, Chair, are well aware of your powers, but for the benefit of the hearing, they include modifying the conditions of the license, excluding a licensable activity, suspending the license, revoking the license, or just simply leaving it as it is. I don't pretend that it's a particularly easy position that you and your colleagues are in this morning. Setting aside the history of this premises and the other concerns that have been raised by the statement of Mr. Deere, which I will leave him to deal with, the key issue before you is an unresolved but very serious criminal allegation against the premises licence holder. Of course, you are not a court of criminal jurisdiction, and your task is not to determine Mr. Talwar's guilt or otherwise to the criminal standard. Your task is to assess whether it remains appropriate for this premises licence to remain in place, essentially, and to determine as an evaluative judgment what steps you consider appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. And I know that you will be well advised by your legal advisor, but if I can just go into a little bit more detail on this issue. You are aware, of course, that licensing is an administrative function. The balance of probabilities applies as a standard of proof. It's very different to the way that criminal law operates, and it's far more discretionary. And if I can just cite to support that suggestion, the case of Hope and Glory, and in particular, paragraphs 41 and 42 of that judgment, in which it was said that it had been rightly submitted that the licensing function of a licensing authority is an administrative function. By contrast, the function of the district judge is a judicial function. The licensing authority has a duty, in accordance with the rule of law, to behave fairly in the decision-making procedure, but the decision itself is not a judicial or quasi-judicial act. It is the exercise of a power delegated by the people as a whole to decide what the public interest requires. It goes on, licensing decisions often involve weighing a variety of competing considerations. And then at the end of that paragraph, although such questions are in a sense questions of fact, they are not questions of the heads or tails variety. They involve an evaluation of what is to be regarded as reasonably acceptable in the particular location. In any case, deciding what, if any, conditions should be attached to a license as necessary and proportionate to the promotion of the statutory licensing objectives is essentially a matter of judgment rather than a matter of pure fact. And furthermore, this question of how the licensing function intersects with a criminal law function was examined in some more detail in the case of East Lindsey District Council and Hanif in 2016, where it was said that the question was not whether the respondent, this was on appeal by the licence holder, had been found guilty of criminal offences before a relevant tribunal, but whether the revocation of his licence was appropriate and proportionate in the light of the salient licensing objectives, namely the prevention of crime and disorder. And this requires a much broader approach to the issue than the mere identification of criminal convictions. It is in part retrospective, in as much as antecedent facts will usually impact on the statutory question, but importantly, the prevention of crime and disorder requires a prospective consideration of what is warranted in the public interest, having regard to the twin considerations of prevention and deterrence. So I mentioned that case law to give you some comfort that what we are not seeking to do is to put you and your colleagues in the position of a court of criminal jurisdiction deciding on whether Mr. Talwar is guilty of a criminal offence. Your function is quite different in these circumstances. Insofar as if you are satisfied it occurred, the conduct attributed to Mr. Talwar satisfies the definition of serious crime afforded by Section 81 of the Regulation of Investigating of RIPA, if I can say that. It's unlikely to be disputed in my submission that this conduct involves the use of violence, and there would indeed be a reasonable expectation of a sentence of imprisonment of 3 or more years. You will see from the way that the evidence has been presented in the statement of PC Hewison that we as the Metropolitan Police Service have sought to be even-handed and fair-minded in the way that we have put the matters before you. So you have both sides of the story as to what happened on the 3rd of May. You have as much information as we have been able to give you. But if I can turn now to the detail of what happened on the 3rd of May, I pray and aid in particular the body-worn footage, which I hope that you and your colleagues have been able to view. That, in my submission, is compelling evidence of what conduct has been laid at Mr. Talwar's door in relation to his behaviour on the 3rd of May. And if I can just take you through the details as set out in PC Hewison's statement, I'll try to do that as briefly as I can, but really the summary starts on page 65 of her statement. She says that on the 3rd of May, police were called to Osterley Park Road at 6:15, where it was alleged that shopkeepers from the corner shop had assaulted a male and stamped on his head. Officers arrived on scene where both suspects and the victim were still present. It was alleged by the female informant that she was in the corner shop on the green, and I don't think there's any dispute that that is Jeet Food and Wine, when both suspects were making derogatory comments towards her, saying they loved her and wanted, I'm going to not use the vernacular, to have sex with her. The female's husband has overheard these comments and come in to challenge both of the males. An argument has then taken place, and where the victim, who is a third male, has heard what has taken place and told both men to be more respectful, suspect 1 has punched that man in his head, and Mr. Talwar, suspect 2, has swiped the victim's legs away with his own foot, causing him to fall to the ground. The victim has then allegedly been sustained to a violent attack where he was repeatedly kicked and his head was stamped on by both of the males. If we go on in PC Hewison's statement, we see that she gives a very helpful summary of what is on the body-worn footage, and that includes what the officers at the scene are told by the female informant, her husband, the victim, and the independent corroborative witness. At the bottom of page 66 in your bundle, you'll see that the female informant says he just beat him, he just stamped on his head. The victim, in fact, walks over towards Mr. Talwar, points to him and says something about him. He then says that he, as in Mr. Talwar, wants to fight the woman. The female informant goes on, she says, he tried to help us, he tried to help us. They tried to fight him with my baby. The male points to a male in a grey jacket and a black bucket hat. That appears to be her husband. He says he tried to help me, as in the victim. Him and his friends stomped him out, rushed him, beat him up. And at this point, the husband identifies Mr. Talwar. He says him and his pervert friend tried to blow kisses at my missus, and I'm travelling with my son, and look what they did to him. The female informant goes on to say, basically, they tried to start on me and my husband, pushing us. And she says, and then he's telling me he's pushing him, going, and she goes on to make the sexual comments that she alleges Mr. Talwar made. I'm with my baby, we walk off, he, pointing to the victim, tries to help us. And then her husband interjects, he tried to help me, next minute they beat him up. And the female says, we were walking down the road and all we see is this guy on the floor, they're stamping on his head, everything. There's more on the body worn, but that I hope gives you a flavour of the essential allegation, which is that the female informant had been in the store, inappropriate comments were made to her, her husband came and intervened and said, took issue with those comments, and then a third male, the victim, intervened and was assaulted. The independent witness account is at paragraph 22 of PC Hewison's statement. He says, you know the guy from the shop, the corner shop, you see the Sikh guy, the Asian guy. He points across the road to where Mr. Talwar is standing. He gives some other details about Mr. Talwar. He then says, and I stopped this guy was on the floor, appearing to gesture to the victim. And he's asked, and they were stamping on his head by the officer, and the victim, and the independent witness says, yes. At paragraph 23, you have a summary of what the body-worn footage shows of what Mr. Talwar's account was at the scene. He effectively says he was the one who was attacked. He mentions a brick being used, and he has a injury on his finger that can be seen on the body-worn footage. Just for completeness, at paragraph 26 of PC Hewison's statement, which is, I believe, at your page 71, she gives us a somewhat more coherent, perhaps, account to PC Cook. She says, so basically what happened, I came out of the shop with my husband, we're walking home. This guy and another guy pushed my husband. She's asked, what was it over? She replies, nothing, I think they're drunk. We were with our baby, you understand, we were walking back. They were trying to push him and then they were trying to fight me as well. And then they're telling me, and she reiterates the sexual comments that were made. You can't say things like this, man. And then this guy comes, what's happening? And they just stamp on his head. And she reiterates, he tried to help us. He was just trying to help us. That's all it was. Another feature of the body-worn footage is that you can see, of course, that the victim of this offence was a disabled male, and you can see the injuries that he has to his forehead, although it's right to note that he didn't require ambulance assistance at the scene. His statement, if I can just draw your attention to that, forgive me, I just need to find the page reference. His statement is at your page 235 of the bundle. And he says this about what happened on the 3rd of May. He says, I was walking down South Road, Southall, when I noticed a couple arguing with, he calls them male 1 and male 2. I don't know if any of these people, of the people arguing, but I heard male 1 and 2 saying things like bullshit to the couple. And male 1 and 2 were very aggressive to the couple. So I felt I should see if everyone was okay. As soon as I approached the group, male 1 punched me in the head with his right hand, and male 2 kicked my leg, causing me to fall to the floor. The 2 males then proceeded to stamp on my head several times before I managed to get up and run away down Osterley Park Road, where I called police. Whilst waiting for the police, I noticed I had a cut above my eye, which was caused by the attack from the males. At no point did I assault the males, and the attack was completely unprovoked. You know that subsequent to giving police that account at the scene, the female informant phoned police that evening and made further allegations of sexual harassment effectively against Mr. Talwar. She said that in essence, when she goes into the shop, she's made to feel uncomfortable by a number of sexualized comments that are given, that are directed to her. You'll also remember that shortly before the interim steps hearing on the 7th of May, those representing Mr. Talwar produced an email purporting to be from the female informant, though not sent from her email address. We now understand that it was sent from the email address of her husband, effectively withdrawing her allegation of sexual harassment and withdrawing her support for the grievous bodily harm investigation against Mr. Talwar. Quite properly, concerns were raised about the legitimacy of that email at the interim steps hearing. But of course, it was forwarded on to the investigative team, and they have made further inquiries of the female informant. And she has confirmed that she no longer wishes to pursue the sexual harassment allegation. One of the reasons given was that she feared reprisals against her, but another reason quite properly given was that she wanted to stay clear of criminal investigations, and that there had been no further incidents of harassment. She no longer went to the shop, she went somewhere else, and she was moving out of the area. All of that is recorded in the crime reports that you have at page 191 and also at page 219, but particularly that is set out at page 233. That withdrawal notwithstanding, of course, there's still the victim's statement in relation to the GBH, and as I say, that investigation remains ongoing. So that, I hope, is a fair summary of effectively where the investigation has got to, as set out in your bundle. You also have, and it was forwarded and circulated, I think yesterday, a further statement by PC Hewison, who has been able to obtain the account that Mr. Talwar gave in his interview. That is set out in full in her statement. Effectively, he says that he was the person who was attacked. He pushed back, and that the victim's injuries were a result of him having slipped because it was raining, fallen on the floor and hit his head. You may note that it doesn't appear to be part of his account in his interview that there was any brick used by the victim. In terms of the history of this premises, you have that set out in the early stages of PC Hewison's statement. I don't intend to take you to any of those reports in any great detail. There's a mixture there. Many of them, Mr. Talwar or his wife are making the reports of incidents that are happening in their shop, either against them or against their staff. There is a report of a machete being in the behind the counter in the shop, but officers investigated and don't find any such item. There is a report of a passport being held as a debt by the shopkeeper, and you may want to put those in the mix of your consideration. I won't go into any detail in relation to the concerns raised by Mr. Robert Deere, because I see that he is here and he's better able to assist you with the contents of his statement than I am. You will have seen that at the close of the statement of PC Hewison, her concerns are such, given the alleged conduct of Mr. Talwar on the 3rd of May, that you should be giving serious concerns to revoking this licence this morning, unless I can assist you any further.
Thank you. You just mentioned Mr. Deere. This might be, would you like to invite him as a witness? This would probably be the most appropriate time.
Yes, absolutely, sir. I'll hand over to him. Thank you.
Sorry, I've got a neighbour that is making what can be described as a racket. I just want to speak with them. Just bear with me, please. Apologies, he was just streaming, so I've closed the doors and he says he's not going to do it for a while. Thank you. Mr. Deere.
Thank you, Chair. I've made this representation under 2 of the 4 licence objectives: prevention of crime and disorder and the protection of children from harm. The premises are situated within the Southall Communities Cluster, for which I have responsibility for licensed premises, and are well known to myself. The area already suffers from alcohol-related problems, with a high density of street drinkers and reports of antisocial behaviour. The borough, as you know, currently has over 1,060 off licences. Half of those are off licences, sorry. This is an area that's been identified as suffering from antisocial behaviour, alcohol-fuelled, by the safety communities over the last 4 years, and has seen an increase in complaints from local residents. Due to that large number of complaints and concerns, the licensing team would visit the off licenses in the area regularly to educate and remind the owners and staff of their roles and responsibilities to ensure compliance. These premises, unfortunately, are one that who refused to heed advice, and on the 8th of September was given a first and final warning after illicit cigarettes and tobacco were found on the premises. And that was on Tuesday, the 8th of September, 2020 at 5:35. Myself and Brian Gorey, who's a trading standards officer, received anonymous intel that they were selling illicit products. When we entered, there was one shop worker alone in the shop who stated that the premises did not sell illegal products. However, an inspection of the rear store found packets of shisha, Indian tobacco, and non-duty paid cigarettes. An inspection of the counter revealed 2 Hennessy cognac and 1 Chivas Regal alcohol box that did not contain alcohol, but more duty paid cigarettes. And there are photographs attached to my representation. Also found 3 boxes of Chupa Chups lollipops, the children's sweets, that the contents have been removed and replaced with various packets of Indian tobacco. And there's a photo of that attached. Under the counter, more packets of Indian tobacco were found. And in total, 72 packets of cigarettes, that's 1,440, 21 times 50 grams of roll your own tobacco, and 8 times 20 grams of shisha, and 6.86 kilograms of Indian tobacco were seized. A copy of all the paper was left for the premises holder with the shop worker, and a request was for CCTV was made. Up to this day, the premises license holder has not supplied any footage or contacted the team in regards to this visit. And obviously, I think we now realise why there's no CCTV, because it doesn't record. Also, on the day of the visit, it's pointed out the premises that were in breach of the following condition of Annex 2 of the operating schedule that says there should always be between 2 and 4 members of staff present on the licensed premises at any one time. And the premises licence holder and the designated premises supervisor, Mr. Talwar, was not present in that shop. I returned to the shop on the 6th of May 2021 to display the notice. And when I entered the shop, the premises licence holder, Jeet Singh Talwar, and one other male were present. Neither were wearing a face covering, and I had to tell the other male to wait outside the shop whilst I displayed the notice. As when I was attaching it to the window, he came and stood directly behind me, trying to read it, basically over my shoulder. Mr. Talwar was advised to rectify the problems with the CCTV system that had been discovered when the police tried to view the footage, and was told it does not record. I believe that these actions undermine the objectives of London Borough of Ealing as a licensed authority, and in the area of public health, the availability of cheap tobacco products not only affects the efforts to encourage residents to give up smoking, but also makes smoking more accessible to young children. This is further exacerbated by the fact that the premises licence holder is hiding illicit products in sweet boxes that are placed within the reach of very young children who may not be seen by their parents, obviously thinking that they're sweets and taking Indian tobacco and putting it in their mouth. It's my recommendation that the premises licence in this case is revoked. So I do not believe there are any conditions that would allay my concerns. There would only have a further negative impact on the area. That's my representation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deere. Questions from the premises team to council? Mr. Griffiths?
Chair, just a few, if I may, please. It may be that PC Hewison is able to answer my first question.
Hang on, just bear with me. Sorry, Heather, you didn't want PC Hewison to make any comment at this stage, did you?
Sir, no. It was simply to say he's here to answer questions.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. So go ahead, Mr. Griffiths. Thank you. Yeah.
PC Hewison, can I just confirm, please, that we've heard about a female informant, the husband, the victim of the alleged incident, and then the independent witness. We have body-worn footage which at least shows all four. There are partial allegations made by some, but not all. Am I correct in saying that now there has been a withdrawal of support by the female informant, that there is only one formal MG11 statement, and that is from the alleged victim? The other three have never provided a statement.
I think I understand what an MG11 statement is, but for the purposes of the subcommittee, could you confirm?
I apologise, Chair. It's a formal statement made in the process of a prosecution or any form of alleged crime.
Thank you.
At present, there is only the victim statement. I did speak to the officer investigating the case yesterday, and he said he's still chasing the independent witness for a statement. He hasn't got it yet, but he's still hoping to take one.
Thank you. And in respect of the female informant, we've heard two reasons as to why she has, one, withdrawn support for the prosecution, but also retracted in regards of the harassment matter. It is suggested that she's fearful of reprisals, but the police reports state, if I'm not mistaken, that there has been no contact between her and Mr. Talwar since the incident is alleged to have occurred. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So any fear of reprisals is born out of her concern, but not anything that he has done to enforce that?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Chair, the only other question I have is for Mr. Deere, if I may, please.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Mr. Deere, I believe you visited the premises in September of 2020. Am I right in saying that there have been no further issues since that date?
None, sir. We haven't visited since that date either.
Thank you.
So there's been no issues reported. Is that correct, Mr. Deere?
That's correct, sir. Obviously, due to resource issues, obviously COVID and other operations, we haven't had a chance to go back and visit.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Sir,
go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't want to cut across Mr. Griffiths if those are his questions. I've just seen on the live chat on the sidebar of my screen that it may be that not everybody has seen the body cam footage. I understand that was sent through on the 18th of May. It has been sent through again. So if anybody hasn't seen it and would like to see it, although it's fully set out in PC Hewison's statement, I would urge that does take place because it's probably the evidence most proximate to this event.
Okay. Alison, did you want to perhaps help us out here? It is set out quite nicely and easily accessible. But obviously, there's how might one view it now? Because we can't put it on. I would understand we don't put it out publicly here. We can't share it, can we?
No, you might wish to adjourn for 10 or 15 minutes to have a look at it. I've just forwarded. PC Hewison's just sent it to me, and I forwarded it to the panel. So if you wanted to do that, then that's at your discretion to have a short adjournment whilst you have a look at that. Okay. Alternatively, as you pointed out, there is a fairly full description of what the footage shows. So I think it's for you and the panel to decide how you wish to proceed.
Well, what I'll say is that unless Mr. Griffiths wants to contest any of the statement by Miss Hewison, we can view it as part of our deliberations. Mr. Griffiths?
No, PC Hewison's summary is a very fair summary of it. I wouldn't seek to object to it, and it would be entirely appropriate for you to consider it in deliberating.
Thank you. That's it. So I'll take an executive decision. We'll view it when we need to.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Invite questions applicant from premises. Councillors, do you have any questions to the premises at this stage, or to Bob?
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Dear? Okay, I'll take it. Councillor Dear hasn't asked, then.
I think she might be on mute, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, sorry. Are we, Chair, in the process of asking question to Mr. Talwar?
No,
I don't have any. I don't have any questions.
Yeah.
For the Mr. Bob Dear or.
Yeah, the police team.
Yeah,
so,
for the police statement.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So to the premises, Mr. Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Can I please thank PC Hewison certainly for her summary, which is both very detailed but also very fair, and also my learning friend for the way that she's opened the matter. Certainly in respect of the trigger allegation, the Chair will have seen Mr. Talwar's version as to how he believes and says that the incident occurs. He accepts that there is, yes, a form of push that he is involved in, but that is the extent to which his involvement finishes, as it were. The whole incident really starts with an incident around the husband and the female informant. They are regular customers. It appears that there is certainly a form of communication that occurs between Mr. Talwar and them, and on the basis that they are regular customers, it appears to be some form of humorous or at least banterous communication. There are in-jokes that are made, and the victim or alleged victim in this account enters the scene believing and mistaking that there are issues that have arisen, and it is unfortunate that he has entered because he unfortunately exacerbates matters. He pushes Mr. Talwar. Mr. Talwar then pushes him back in self-defense. He falls over, and the injuries that he sustains are as a result of that. You'll have seen Mr. Talwar's interview. He vehemently denies that there's any form of punch by him or any stamping to the head. I accept that there is body-worn footage from the scene, but the incident is alleged to have taken place at the shop at Jeet Food and Wine. It's quite clear when you see the body-worn footage that all parties are a significant distance away from that premises. And so, Chair, what I ask you and your colleagues to consider is there a difference between Mr. Talwar as a single entity and the premises itself? Do the police have concerns over the premises, or do they actually have concerns over how Mr. Talwar deals with his day-to-day emotions, his day-to-day running? If you believe actually that the concern is Mr. Talwar, then the premises itself can continue to run and continue to conduct its business. It may be that, Chair, you and your colleagues believe that there are ways of removing Mr. Talwar from proceedings with regards to the business that would allow the premises to keep running, but alleviate concerns of the police that any form of issue would occur again. There have been reference, certainly within PC Hewison's statement, prior issues which have taken place at the premises. It is quite clear that a number of those are not the fault of Mr. Talwar, nor have they been caused by his engagement. It is members of the public who enter the shop who are unfortunately intoxicated or have started to cause a disturbance. And quite rightly, Mr. Talwar telephones the police and takes the appropriate course of action. And respectfully, that shows that he is a responsible owner and premises license holder. He is able to deal with things in a correct and professional manner. And there has only been one recorded incident, certainly in respect of any breach with regards to tobacco and alcohol, nothing further since September 2020. And so respectfully, whilst there are what appear to be a number of separate incidents that all occur at the premises, my respectful submission is you should keep those really in the back of your mind in terms of weight that you would attribute to any fault that applies to Mr. Talwar. It is quite clear, yes, that there has been some form of incident. And I agree with my learned friend when she says that this is quite clearly going to be something which would potentially fall under the remit of serious crime. But it is whether he is involved to such an extent. That really is the question that, Chair, you and your colleagues have to determine. You don't have to determine it to the criminal standard, but you do have to determine whether it is appropriate and proportionate to, in the words of the police, revoke the license based upon one incident which doesn't happen near the shop. It happens quite some distance away. It is the only link to the shop itself really is the fact that he is a member of staff. It's not something that happens in the shop itself. And so this is not something that can be considered significantly dangerous or a significant nexus to that incident. What I would suggest is that there quite clearly have been concerns with regards to the CCTV that have been raised even prior to this offence or alleged offence. And if, Chair, you look at the conditions on the licence, it is quite clear that it's not as expansive as one would ordinarily expect, certainly in a borough with this many off licences. It may be, Chair, and I'll certainly deal with it in summing up, that there may be conditions that you would seek to add to that licence to alleviate conditions of any further issues, certainly with regards to CCTV and making sure that is in a working state to record. I'm told that when Mr. Deere attended on the 6th of May of this year, that CCTV wasn't working, and you heard certainly on the last occasion that the CCTV and the insides of the premises were being renovated, and that's why it didn't record but only live streamed. That has now been rectified, so that CCTV from the 8th of May, I'm told, was recording, and any recordings that were saved could be forwarded to the police if they so wish to view them. So he has taken the appropriate steps to deal with issues that have been raised. Any issues that were raised in terms of illicit alcohol or illicit cigarettes have been dealt with because you've heard there are no reports. Any issues in respect of CCTV have been dealt with because the CCTV now records. The only evidence that you have or that theoretically would be admissible in any form of criminal proceedings is that at the moment of a statement from the alleged victim. I accept that you have the body-worn footage to view, but I would ask that you consider the weight to which you apply to that on the basis you've now heard that the female informant has withdrawn her allegation and her support. There has been no direct contact between Mr. Talwar and this informant since the incident was alleged to have occurred. He has not in any way intimidated or pressured her to withdraw her allegation. And you've heard the fair way that it's been opened, that she is moving out of the area and doesn't want to be involved in any form of criminal proceedings. And so I would ask that you seriously consider whether the actual problem with the issues that you have before you is the premises, or is it Mr. Talwar as a person? Because if it's Mr. Talwar as a person, conditions can be put on the licence and sanctions can be put in place in respect of that licence to deal with the issues appropriately rather than revoking it. I fully accept that if your concerns relate solely to the premises, then Mr. Talwar is in some difficulty, but he fully understands that as well. And he's willing to do whatever he can to assist you and your colleagues in alleviating any concerns that you or the Metropolitan Police may have over his conduct. Those would be my submissions.
Thank you. Just get where I am on my checklist. Do you have any questions, Miss Oliver, to Mr. Griffiths?
Not for Mr. Griffiths, thank you.
Or anybody with him? Fine. No. Okay. This might be an opportunity to introduce Mr. Talvez, and I have a number of questions for him. I want to understand whether where he obtained and consumed alcohol on the night. What did he drink?
Chair, maybe I can answer that. Mr. Talwar's English, as you heard on the last occasion, is particularly poor. He's able to answer questions if you require him to, because his wife is there to translate.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Panchal will be able to help with that as well.
He will, certainly in respect of the alcohol. He wasn't working. He just happened to be in the shop. It had gone past his working hours. As he left the shop, he took a beer, drank that beer. It wasn't finished by the time that the alleged incident occurred, and that was the only alcohol that he consumed on the night.
Okay, so where did he buy the beer, and where did he drink the beer?
I believe that he took the beer from the shop itself.
Okay. What beer was it?
I believe it's a bottle of Corona.
Okay. And where did he drink it?
My understanding is that as he left the shop, he then consumed it whilst he was walking away.
Okay. So he had been working at the shop and obtained a bottle of beer from the shop and drank it walking away. To who and where?
I believe he was going home. He'd finished his shift at the shop, and as he was walking home, he drank the beer.
And how then did he enter this fracas, this situation? With a beer in hand, or?
That I don't know. I don't believe so. No bottle is ever noticed by the police. No bottle is ever referred to by any of the witnesses on the body-worn footage. It's my understanding that the alleged victim in this matter intervenes when he is walking away from the shop, having seen something that he is concerned about.
Okay. Okay. And so Mr. Talver is the premise license holder, the DPS, and he was the one who was buying the beer and walking away from his premises.
That's correct.
With the beer. Okay. Right. That was what I wanted some clarification on. Councillor Sumner, did you have any questions?
Not at this time, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cordier, I think you indicated that you wanted to ask some questions at this point.
No, I think, Chair, you have raised those questions. Thank you.
Okay, fine, yeah. Bear with me. So really, I think this is the opportunity for the applicant to sum up, and yes, please go ahead, Ms. Oliver.
Thank you, sir. Two points really. Firstly, to reiterate that the body-worn footage is recorded very shortly after this incident took place. It's of excellent quality and it's very proximate in time and place. You may feel that it's compelling evidence of what has just occurred, and that also there's no real room for mistake here. That footage shows 4 witnesses: the female informant, her husband, the independent witness, and the ultimate victim. And the clear thrust of what they say to officers is that Mr. Talwar was the aggressor, and that he and his friend subjected the victim to a serious assault. So we say there is evidence on the balance of probabilities that he is involved in this incident, and that he caused nasty injuries in the course of a serious assault. But I leave you to your assessment of that body-worn footage in retirement. Secondly, Mr. Talwar is the premises license holder. It's not just that he's the designated premises supervisor in this case. There is a close and unassailable nexus between him and this premises. This incident, we understand, starts in or as people are leaving the premises. It involves his customers. And even if it was just right that this is just about Mr. Talwar on an exercise of his own outside of the premises, away from the premises, you're being asked to do something quite which I don't accept that it is, incidentally, but you would be being asked to do something quite artificial to divorce your assessment of his personal temperament with whether it is appropriate, bearing in mind the licensing objectives for this license to continue. So we say, for all the reasons you've heard, bearing in mind the evidence of Mr. Deere, bearing in mind the incident on the 3rd of May as set out by PC Hewson, it would be appropriate in this case for you to take action against this licence and to seriously consider revoking it, unless I can assist you further.
Thank you very much. And there's no extra comments you want to take from your police team or Mr. Deere, no?
I don't believe so, thank you.
Right, thank you. Mr. Griffiths, in reply, sir, if you'd like to sum up.
Chair, respectfully, revoking the licence is one step too far. I would submit that serious consideration needs to be given to a form of suspension of the licence. Chair knows it can be up to 3 months, and if it has to be at such level, then so be it. Mr. Talwar understands, but I respectfully submit that that is something that should be considered rather than the revocation. The licence conditions are, and Mr. Talwar understands, not very expansive and quite lenient in some respects. He knows he has to be realistic about where he stands, and he asks me to suggest that conditions be added to that licence in this regard, that CCTV be required at the premises to be in a position to record for a period of 31 days, and that recording be saved on a hard drive and can be produced to the police or local authorities on demand. Also, that all training manuals and training procedures must be put in place as they are currently, but there actually be a specific condition on the licence in respect to that. And also there must be refusals books kept in store, which again they are, but also a condition to be on the licence. So that is something that will alleviate concerns of the local authority. I accept that there are no alcohol related offences here, but it's something that Mr. Talwar wishes to show that he is willing to put in place to make sure that he alleviates concerns of all those who are involved. He knows that there is, I wouldn't say necessarily compelling evidence, but there certainly is evidence of a fracas that has been identified within the body-worn footage. But respectfully, this is a matter as to whether it is a frolic of his own or a nexus relation to the premises itself. he can be removed as the designated premises supervisor and a new one installed. He has competent staff who hold a personal license who are able to fill that position for him. And yes, he would still remain premises license holder, but it means that he is not in a constant day-to-day interaction with members of the community, which really is what causes the police concern, because that is how the alleged incident has occurred, because he is involved with members of the community. If he is somewhat removed from that face-to-face conversation with customers, then hopefully that should alleviate any issues that may arise with regards to his continued running of the business, but also put in place with regards to the other conditions more safety features on that license, which will enable him to show that he's taking the correct steps forward. Unless I can assist any further, those are my submissions.
Yeah, you're talking about show the next steps forwards. I mean, there is substantial evidence, not specific to his shop, but overall, that high alcohol beer, high strength alcohol beer, contributes to the antisocial behaviour of neighbourhoods. Given your client says he wants to take this seriously or show going forward, would he consider alcohol by volume of cans to be below sort of 6%, i.e., 5.9 being the strongest beers in the shop on sale?
He would. He would respectfully do anything he can to show that he is trying to assist all those involved and that he can run a premises properly.
Okay, so the 5.9 would be agreeable to your clients?
Would be no issues with respect to that.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, before we retire, did you have any questions to Mr. Griffiths?
Chair, if I might, if we brought that to 5%, would you be happy to do that? On the beer, 5% rather than 5.9?
I would have to take instructions. I know he's willing to assist as much as he can, but that certainly is a question for Mr. Talwar.
I know the police are keen to bring down the alcohol to 5% if possible.
Can I, sorry, Mr. Griffiths, can I come in or?
Yeah, that's yeah, I guess, Mr. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Griffiths, for allowing me, because I don't want to override. I understand where Councillor Sumna is coming in, and I deal with quite a lot of premises in the area. You see me every other day in front of the community. I think I should have a permanent seat there. But coming back to it, I've seen the premises, and 5% at the moment. Bob Deere would agree with me, and he's had chats with a lot of premises, does ruin the complete business. And a lot of councils around the area that we deal with have come out with 6% to 6.5. That's the norm that avoids the street drinkers to go on a stronger beer. And I suggest that 6% would be much more appropriate for businesses to avoid the street drinkers, as well as have less. So I suggest that 6% is much more appropriate. 5% would have no beers, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, unless we've got anything more, it's 11:30 now. And we will retire. I would anticipate 12:45 with some confidence. That will give us an opportunity to deliberate and write up the notice. So that's 12:45. But obviously we reserve the right as a subcommittee to take longer should we need to. So 12:45, Katie Sullivan, Democratic Services, she'll be in and out of the room just to make, if there is any delays, we'll let you know. But 12:45 with some certainty. Unless there's anybody else, we'll ask you to leave the room, but make sure you leave the room as opposed to we don't want to throw you out, because if we throw you out, you may not be able to come back in. So if you could all leave the room while we deliberate, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.